Welcome to another exciting episode of the Collect and Destroy podcast. I am your host, the Baxter of Puppets. On this week, we are presenting an intergalactic broadcast from Endor to Tatooine as I sit down with a couple of scruffy-looking nerf herders to recap and discuss our favorite moments and characters from Season 1 of Disney Plus's The Mandalorian. Nate Fehlauer, Crystal Schmidt, welcome back to the show.
Hello.
Hello, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me back.
Well, you did pretty good last time, so
it's great to be part of your first three-way episode.
Yeah, what an honor.
Very exciting.
Nate, how's it going? It's spooky season is upon us. What have you been doing lately? Holed up in your bunker?
Yeah, it's definitely been pretty spooky up here in Wisconsin. Temperatures are dropping. Leaves are blowing. We're all staying in our own homes. We're just, I don't know, it's very spooky. Masks everywhere.
Crystal, how about you? How's your podcast been going, Wrestling Public Radio?
Wrestling Public Radio has been going great. I recently started taking classes so that I can obtain my real estate sales license. So I kind of had to cut back a little bit. I'm not doing weekly episodes anymore. It's more bi-weekly and kind of just squeezing them in as I can get them done. But so far, so good. I think everybody's been pretty pleased with the results.
Yeah, it seems like the feedback's been pretty positive. What was your latest episode about?
The most recent episode that came out was about CM Punk, which has a lot of really cool background. He happens to be straight edge, so that is something that ties in really well with my own history growing up, being a straight edge person, and into like hardcore and punk music. So that was a really fun episode to dive into, and also have somebody who's a little bit more current for people who started watching wrestling maybe later or are more interested in more recent stuff than like the old school ones that I had been doing.
So I know we've had a lot of time in recent months to binge shows, movies. You guys been watching anything good? I think all three of us have been checking out Raised by Wolves on HBO Max. Nate, how would you describe that show?
Yeah, I mean it's a sci-fi show about androids raising children. So I mean, I think anybody that hears that description is going to be pretty much like, okay, yeah, this is interesting. Ridley Scott's involved, so as you know, the guy behind Alien and Blade Runner. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely as weird as it sounds. The effects are awesome. The story's great. It's got themes of family, raising children, themes of survival on distant planets. Yeah, I think it's a really cool show. I'm actually still in the middle of it right now.
Yeah, I think we just finished it up. It only gets better as you get deeper into it. It's kind of got a Westworld meets Game of Thrones vibe. So if you like those two things, I think this is definitely a show for you. Crystal, your thoughts on Raised by Wolves?
Yeah, I agree with what you were saying. It definitely has some really cool vibes going on with it, with like the Westworld kind of feel of like the futurism going on. I also really enjoy the way that the characters pull you in different directions. It seems like you never really know who the good person is in any episode. Like it can switch from scene to scene where like you're feeling a way about somebody, like, and it might be negative and then it turns to positive all of a sudden and you're like, oh, please, nothing bad happened to them. So it's you kind of just all over the place watching this show. And I'm really excited. I know Nate hasn't finished season 1 quite yet, so I'm not going to give away any spoilers or anything, but I'm really excited to watch season 2, which I wasn't sure if I was going to like it that much. As we were watching it, it was like a little bit weird when we first started it. But I think that by the end of season 1, it confirmed. I'm very excited to find out what happens moving forward.
Yeah, I think like halfway in, I'm like, okay, this can take a turn of two ways. One way is going to be like, man, I got to watch season 2, just to see what happens, but I'm not fully vested. And then the other way is the way it went, which was like, oh yeah, I'm in. So like I would say too, like this doesn't spoil anything, but talking Ridley Scott, if you're a fan of like the Alien franchise,
right,
like
especially like Prometheus.
Yeah. Prometheus is one of the best.
There's a lot of definitely what the kind of moments. I would say you never know what's going to happen. So I mean, I love that kind of show just in general.
Yeah, and it's like intelligent writing. It's not just shock value. The like what's going on moments. So let's get things started here. And before we do get started, I would say if you've tuned in and you haven't seen season 1 of The Mandalorian, you're either going to learn about the entire first season or you're going to have the first entire season spoiled for you. So you may want to save this one if you haven't seen season 1. But since season 2 is coming out at the end of the month, we thought this would be like a good refresher for folks to check it out. Season 1 debuted November 12th of 2019. The Mandalorian is a Star Wars samurai Western television series created by Jon Favreau and released on Disney+. It's set 5 years after the events of Return of the Jedi. It follows the title character, a Mandalorian bounty hunter named Din Djarin, and his exploits beyond the reaches of the New Republic. In this season, we see Din Djarin, also known as Mando, finding himself inadvertently entwined in an unexpected adventure after taking a simple commission to track down and capture a 50-year-old target, the adorable, small, Yoda-like creature known simply as the Child, and deliver him to the client. Feeling guilty for abandoning the Child to the Empire, Din Djarin returns to the site of the transaction to steal the Child back and flee on his ship, the Razor Crest. The remainder of the season, we follow Mando's journeys and meet a rogues gallery of exciting characters, all the while with the Empire, bounty hunters, and the mighty Moff Gideon on his tail. So with all of that being said, Crystal, what were your first thoughts when the show was initially announced?
The first impressions that I had were just utter excitement. I have loved Star Wars for a really long time. I am a fan of everything new that's been coming out. There's not really been anything for me that's been like a deal breaker by any means. So finding out more, like as they develop more about things that happened outside of the original trilogy, the prequels, and then the new trilogy, it's something to look forward to, where you're like, they're just continuing to expand, and you learn new characters, you learn new lore that goes on, and I always really look forward to that anytime something new from Star Wars comes out.
I vividly remember when that first trailer dropped that it was exciting to see something, like you were saying, outside of the Skywalker saga. Like everything is pretty much, other than there's a few moments where we've seen things outside of that, but for most part, it's been about those 9 films. So to see something out of it, and even like some elements seemed a little dark in the preview, and not that I was looking for a dark Star Wars, but it was something new and fresh. Nate, what were your takeaways when you saw that trailer?
I mean, I guess my first thought anytime I hear about new Star Wars stuff is I'm very worried and concerned.
Sure.
I feel like I've been hurt before, and I can't take another heartbreak here. Yeah. So at the same time, I'm excited about it because I like the character. I assume I do because I like Boba Fett, and he's kind of that familiar face, if you will, familiar helmet.
Well, and there was kind of like a little bit of uncertainty. Like it was a little bit unclear as far as what we were going to get, because it kind of sounded a little bit like it was supposed to be like a Boba Fett kind of thing. And then all of a sudden it was like, there's no Boba Fett at all. And even the actor who plays Din Djarin was like, he took the role because he thought it was going to be Boba Fett.
Right, yeah.
And that's not what we got at all. We got something completely different, but utterly amazing.
Yeah, I think it allows them to give you that familiarity, but create something totally new with a totally new storyline, which actually ended up, it worked awesome.
That sound, boys and ghouls, means it's time for the ranking. Today, the 3 of us will be ranking each of our top 3 favorite episodes of season 1. I'll run through my list 3 through 1, followed by Nate and Crystal's, and then the debate and discussion shall commence, starting with our number 1s and working backwards from there. You guys ready?
Let's see it.
Oh yeah.
All right. So
wow.
in number 3, I have chapter 7, The Reckoning. Number 2, chapter 3, The Sin. And my number 1 pick was chapter 1, The Mandalorian, the very first episode. Nate, you have number 3 is chapter 5, The Gunslinger. Chapter 2 is your number 2 pick, The Child. And your number 1 pick was chapter 6, The Prisoner. And Crystal, your number 3 was chapter 3, The Sin. Your number 2 was chapter 4, Sanctuary. And number 1 was chapter 8, Redemption. So we really have a mixed bag here of completely different picks.
Yeah, I love this.
Let's start with our number 1s. Nate, you want to start with your number 1, chapter 6, The Prisoner?
Yeah. So it's chapter 6, so it's already pretty far into the season when this one appears. And we've already seen Mando kind of team up with a number of different bounty hunters and even a whole planet of a whole population that he helped out, which we'll get to, I'm sure, with you guys. But what I really liked was that this time he was teamed up with this total group of villainous scum, just these total shady characters, which I think is just total classic Star Wars. All these old faces we've come to know from the Cantina, from the first movie, all the way to the Twi'leks, with the long tentacle heads. And I just think it's so cool that he's teamed up with these guys, and you're just like, right away, you're just like, what the hell is going to happen with these guys? Like something bad for sure, right? And it's totally like a heist movie too. It's like they're going after something, and they think they have a plan, but things go wrong. And I just really love that. I love the great interactions between the characters. Like there's some great lines, like Bill Burr plays Mayfeld, like the gun weapon expert, and just some of his lines, his one-liners are just so hilarious. And as well as like some of the other characters, like Berg, the big guy. He's got the muscle, and then Xi'an's the one with the tentacle head, and then you got a droid in there because Mando hates droids. So it's just like you just know like things are gonna, even if these guys are kind of on his side, you just know like some bad shit's gonna happen, right?
Well, and of course,
on the ship,
the droid is the one.
What's that?
I was going to say the droid, of course, is the one that has to fly his ship too.
Yeah. I thought that was funny that like. Basically, Ran, the head guy, was like, "We brought you in just for your ship," and he was like, "I didn't know that was part of the deal, even." And then they wouldn't even let him fly it. So it's like, what is he there for? It was just kind of a fun twist. I love all the action on the ship. You get to see Mando like kick ass right away as soon as they get in there. The others just sit back and watch, and he's got to do it all.
It's such a classic episodic. Portion to the series, because you see all these characters who instantly become classic characters. So now they can show up in any season at any point, and you're going to be like, oh yeah, we were in it together in that episode, chapter 6, The Prisoner. Like we already know what these guys are capable of. Yeah.
I mean, it's totally true. Like they already have a backstory that we don't know. And now they have even more of a backstory next time they meet, if they do.
Yeah.
Because they all survive at the end, except for Zero, obviously. He gets blown up. But so I love that. I love the retro look of like this the prison ship, especially like the command center. It was all just like the retro graphics and the big buttons flashing and the screens with like basically like Atari, like 8-bit looking, radar or whatever's on those things.
Yeah, and it definitely it felt very old school with like just having specific scenes carried out, just running from room to room in the same ship. I think that was really cool, as opposed to like, I feel like a lot of The Mandalorian is spent out and about like in nature, so to speak, whereas this one was all just in one ship, and it would like the entire storyline plays out being on that ship and trying to free a prisoner.
Yep. Yeah, just one big set, all interior shots pretty much.
Yeah.
The classic like long corridors like you see in New Hope kind of on that first ship you see in that movie. And yeah, I just love all the twists and the double crossing, and then there's a triple crossing right at the end when Mando kind of screws them over, right, by attaching the beacon to the belt of Quinn.
Yeah, it's good.
Great episode. Great
I
chapter, I should say.
I don't think it even, I think an even bigger part of why it's got staying power is the casting of all those actors.
Yeah.
Clancy Brown as Berg, like that right there. I mean, that guy's been in so many things from Highlander to SpongeBob. But whatever character he is, he fully embraces that character. So in this one, it was awesome.
Yeah, he's so funny. He's just like, he goes up to Mando and he's just like, tiny. It's just like hilarious, like one-liners. One-liner that was really funny that I gotta bring up was Mayfeld when they discover the child on the ship, and they're like, "What the hell is this thing?" And he's like, he talks to Xi'an, and he's like, "Did you guys make this?" Like, meaning like, is that their child together? Like, that's so awesome. And then he's like, "Well, or maybe it's a pet." Like, it's just so funny that like Mando brought these guys on board and he's got that small child there. It's just like one of the sort of father son, like getting to know this kid and taking care of it and like kind of learning from that.
Well, in the world of Star Wars too, like there's so many unexpected creatures and people that is that your partner, or is that your pet, or is that your child? Like there like in any area on any planet, like there's so many things that they kind of almost poke fun at that fact that you never really know what you're going to discover and what the relation is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it also highlights like the whole reason why we're experiencing The Mandalorian as a show is that like we don't really know anything about Yoda's species, and this is a way to kind of introduce other characters of the same species and give you a time lapse of like, this is when they still look like babies, but they're 50 years old. So theoretically, like they're grown, but not.
That's very strange that he's just this tiny baby like thing, but he kind of seems like he's a little smarter than a baby at the same time too.
Yeah, so like the questioning of like what's the deal with this little guy is the same for us too. Like clearly in the shows or like in Star Wars canon, it's not something that's common.
Yeah, definitely was not expecting to see more of Yoda looking things.
Yeah,
but I guess we'll get to the child a little more later.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So Crystal, your number one pick is actually the season finale, Chapter 8, Redemption. What were your thoughts there?
My thoughts behind putting that one as my number one mainly revolved around IG-11. So in this episode, they have like this plan set up for how they're going to get Baby Yoda somewhere safe, and it all kind of foils, and these scout troopers end up kidnapping the child, and they're out and about with this baby. And the conversation that happens between the scout troopers is one of the funniest parts of this entire season, because it's Jason Sudeikis and Adam Pally, who are fairly famous comedic actors, and the two of them are basically acknowledging that like scout troopers have no aim whatsoever. Like they're both just like trying to like shoot at a target and they never hit it because that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
So
hilarious.
Between that being like the funniest thing and IG-11 being the total hero that this episode needed, it really stuck with me and was like, oh, we're setting up everything so well for season 2, that I think that it's probably the most important episode in my opinion. IG-11 rescuing Baby Yoda, because instead of being just a bounty hunter droid, he's now a nurse droid, and so he's like a babysitter for the baby, and he comes into this siege that's happening between Goth Midian I mean, Moff Gideon. Moff Gideon and the rest of the gang who are holed up in this space, and he just like lets loose on all of these troopers that are there holding them under siege, and basically like ruins this standoff that's happening. And also he saves the Mandalorian, Din Djarin, at the end as well. Everything about the final episode, I think, just it melted perfectly to like flow you right into season 2. So if you're not able to watch the entire season, or like watch the season before season 2 starts, I think that episode 8 is such a good one to be able to watch right before you start the next season.
And that's not just because it's your number one pick, Crystal?
No, I think it really like it ties everything up and gives you an idea of what's going on so that you know what to expect when season 2 starts.
Yeah, especially when you take like a year off of a show, like, and you don't have a chance. I mean, hopefully this podcast recaps enough that'll get you prepared. But so my number one pick, I went with chapter 1. And that's just kind of like, because to me, that like roped me in immediately to the series. Like I watched that episode, and when I was rewatching the series to do this ranking, I kept comparing all the episodes to the first episode. And my takeaways of chapter 1 is it instantly feels like a Western. The music, which isn't like overtly Western, but it's almost like a throwback to those Sergio Leone films, like the way the music was with the bass recorder. And then even like the way he walks into that cantina bar in the beginning, it's like walking through the little wooden doors in the old Westerns. He walks in there and you immediately know he's like a badass. He ends up, beating everybody up in that barroom brawl. He's not to be messed with. He drops the line, I can bring you in warm or I can bring you in cold. And you're like, okay, I now know what this character is all about. Like I can tell.
He's an ice cold killer.
you find out that he doesn't like droids, which is like something that is a recurring theme throughout this season. And because of that, he passes on the first land speeder that comes to transport him, and instead is picked up in a land speeder by a character played by the very funny Brian Posehn and fellow metalhead Brian Posehn. And right there, I'm like, okay, they get it. They're putting Brian Posehn in this thing. Like, this is for like those types of fans. It's not just for the casual people. Like, you're putting uber Star Wars fans that are actors in this thing, which even before that, Horatio Sands had shown up. Brian Posehn's character says, "Stay off the ice," and then is instantly eaten by a giant monster. And then I think too, just the reveal at the end of that episode of the child.
Yeah, this episode was close to making it into my top 3. I'm not sure what ended up being the reason I didn't put it in, but I agree with like everything that you've said about why that episode is really important.
Introduced Grief Karga, which is, Carl Weathers, the legendary Carl Weathers, Apollo Creed. He was in Predator. And even just like that whole meeting with the client, you see these like remnant stormtroopers. And that too kind of tells you like, this is a post-war world. Like, this is after the big war, 5 years, in fact, after Return of the Jedi. So that kind of sets the tone for what is the rest of the season then.
Yeah, I loved seeing the dirty, sandy stormtroopers, like their uniforms or whatever, their armor had not been cleaned. It was like these guys still had the armor, but it was like older and more rugged. I mean, it ties in with the Western theme, like you talked about. And I love that, like you said, the intro, when he comes in, he might as well be coming through like a swinging door, right? Like stomping through in spurs, and like even from everything from like the beer being slid down the bar, he grabs, all the way to like him slinging basically like a whip and grabbing this guy through the door. I mean, just amazing, like intro to the character, kind of set the whole scene for the whole first season.
Yeah, that scene, I really enjoyed the cantina because it's the original cantina that we're all familiar with, but it's no longer bustling with all these different creatures and people. It's completely run down, and you're like, whoa, where are we? Like, what time are we in? Because this is so completely different from anything we've ever seen the cantina being.
Mm-hmm.
So I found that really like interesting from the very start of being like, oh, we are somewhere completely different. And like the fact that there's a droid who's working the bar now is quite amusing, to be like, oh, it's just they just have like a stand-in in there to serve drinks now.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and I said, we have the big child reveal at the end of the episode. And I think the most important part about that is no one knew, like the whole world, the whole galaxy, no one knew that that was about to happen. And we'll talk about the child later and the impact of the child later, but no one knew. Like I don't know if any of that had been spoiled for either of you prior to seeing the episode, but I had no idea that was coming, and they hadn't promoted that or anything. So when you see that little cutie, just like
It was a surprise for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like
and then
culturally defining moment for everybody.
yeah, there's very few of those in your lifetime that you see something and it's like so huge. So let's get to our number twos. Nate, your number two. I think you were confused, so you just picked number two.
That's exactly it. Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Chapter 2, the child. I almost included this one as well. You want to talk a little bit about chapter 2?
Yeah, I mean, this follows up right after your number 1, so perfect. I guess you did the same thing there. So this happens right after he won that battle, which is the classic Main Street Western battle. And he's kind of like he's victorious and he's been kicking ass like this whole time. Well, in this one, we start to see a little more of his like fallibility and he's able to make mistakes. He's not like the perfect hero, the perfect warrior. The cool thing, this one starts with he battles a familiar enemy in the I got to look this up here, the Trandashans, which is the Bosk looking character from the lineup of the bounty hunters in I believe Empire Strikes Back, the very end of that.
Yeah.
So he battles those Bosk-like creatures, which is awesome. And then he starts to get into trouble because he comes back to his ship and it's like all ripped apart. So right away he's got this roadblock. We kind of thought he got the child and now he's going to head back and like everything's great. Okay, he did the bounty, perfect. Well, now his ship's all torn apart. These Jawas are running away with it. Another familiar kind of creature there. These ones are, this is Arvala 7, and these Jawas have red eyes, which was kind of cool. Made them kind of look a little more evil. I don't know.
They refer to them in the action figures as off-world Jawas.
Okay.
So I don't know if the original ones, like the way that they originated for us on Tatooine, are they from Tatooine? And these ones, like you said, with the red eyes?
Yeah, we're starting to see that they don't just exist on Tatooine. Like there's different varieties, I guess, mainly in the color of eyes, apparently, the glowing eyes. And we see the Jawas as being actually a very formidable enemy in this. I mean, they have the huge sand crawler, and he just cannot penetrate and get inside this thing. I mean, it's just like this 10-story tall building that he just battles his way up, and they're throwing shit at him, and they're opening windows, and it just kind of shows the Jawas in kind of a different light than we're used to, of them just being kind of these weak little, scavengers.
Yeah,
which I thought was just awesome. And then later we see him battling the Mudhorn, which is probably one of my favorite action sequences in the whole series. Just the way the way they do the sound effects and just kind of raise the intensity of the scene with that. And we see him get thrown out of the cave, and then this thing comes out, and it's just this massive beast. And that whole battle shows Mando as, like I said, this character that he can make mistakes. He's not the most powerful, even with all his weapons. He can be defeated. And I just love that scene at the end where he's just holding up or at the end of that sequence where he's holding the knife up, and the thing's like about to destroy him, right? And then that's the first time, I believe, that we see the child's power with the Force to raise this thing up and save Mando. So yeah, I just love that whole scene. And yeah, like I said, the music the whole time and the whole thing with getting the egg back, and then the Jawas are like, okay, we're gonna eat this egg.
The Jawas eating that egg is so funny to me.
It looks like a damn like Cadbury Easter egg with all the goo inside, and they're just slopping.
That's the only thing I could think of was that it tasted like a Cadbury cream egg.
Yeah. And it's this super precious thing, but they're just like basically scooping it and dumping it everywhere. It's just weird. It's funny though.
It seems like a very Jawa thing to do.
Oh, totally.
So that's episode 2. One thing to point out in episode 2, you never see a human face the whole episode.
Oh.
That's a little. I call that a fun fact. I'm known.
Yeah, that's a fun fact.
I do like that.
So, Crystal, your number 2 is Chapter 4, Sanctuary. What kind of fun facts do you have on that one?
Oh, well, I don't know about human faces.
There's a lot of human faces in that one, actually. Too many.
Yeah. So episode 4 kind of brings us to it does bring us to a totally different planet. So they end up on a forest planet called Sorgan, and it's like a palate cleanser as far as visuals in the show. That entire episode it feels very fresh, and it also like instills some hope in the show. So I think that's really important, where you have this village that they end up at, and it kind of presents itself as some like an oasis of sorts, where they're able to get a break from things. They're able to maybe settle down and be hidden from people, so they're not being hunted anymore. But as it turns out, this village is being raided by outside people who are trying to take advantage of the situation, being a lot of women and children who are around. They constantly are being raided. So they get the Mandalorian and Cara Dune to help them thwart the next raid that's coming up. And that village battle scene is really, really cool. The way that it plays out, I think it's really cool that they brought in the actual villagers to be fighters. They helped train them and get them ready and come up with a plan. I think that was all really inspirational. So that's kind of something that I really enjoyed. I also really, really loved watching the child interact with all the other children who were in the village. I think that that's probably one of the most precious child moments.
Adorable.
Yeah.
I found it very precious as well.
In the entire season. It just felt really great to get some good laughs in there that were, it was just all meant to be playful during those scenes. I really liked it.
I didn't include that one because I kind of thought it was a lot like Seven Samurai as far as the plot.
Sure.
It's kind of been done before.
I never saw that, so it was fresh for me.
Also, I had a problem with the ATST.
Yeah.
So they go and they have these explosives, and they use them in like some weird, I don't know, bathhouse or whatever that was. I don't know what the tanks of water thing. Why didn't they just attach the explosives to like one of the legs of the ATST that was right there and blow it off, and just not worry about that anymore? I don't know. They just had problems with that. I'm sorry.
They seem to paint the ATST as being like super dangerous. Like, I think that in the original movies, they don't really like, they're like formidable opponents, but in this one, they're like, Cara and Din Djarin are like, you guys have to leave. If they have an ATST, you can't be here.
Yeah,
you have to leave. You're all gonna die.
Yeah.
Well, this one had red eyes though, so it's kind of. I mean, I liked that aspect of it, that they made it look almost like a monster. It almost was like Godzilla or you know, King Kong coming through those trees and like tearing the trees apart as it came through. Like that was really cool. But at the same time, I was like, well, I know you dug a huge pit for it to fall in, but maybe you could have just blown one of the legs off it, and then what's it going to do, But I do love that episode. I love them all, so I just wanted to give you
That was the first episode that was like its own story, like
yeah. It was cute. All the villagers, all the children playing with the baby, and
that episode also was directed by Bryce Dallas Howard, who is Ron Howard's daughter, and he directed Solo.
yeah, she did a better job than he did. That's my opinion.
I hope she hears this.
Yeah, she'll be listening. And she'll be like, I
All
told
right,
you,
so
Dad.
So my number 2, Dad, I heard Nate Fehlauer talking about my directing on the Collect and Destroy podcast.
Yep. Little Opie.
little Richie Cunningham there. So for my number 2, I went with chapter 3, The Sin. So essentially, I mean, this is after he has dropped the child off. On the way to dropping off the child takes the little ball off of the control knob in the ship, which is just like a cute little moment, because he's kind of like, it's not exactly something you want to be happening, but you kind of see the innocence in the character. He takes that Beskar payment from the client, and he goes back and he has brand new armor made out of this shiny silver Beskar. And then essentially, like I had said in the synopsis, he starts to feel guilty, and he goes back to save the child, essentially, which is just like a great action sequence of like going in there. He ends up using those brand new whistling birds, which are awesome.
Oh, I love those.
Able to take out, and that was just because he had excess Beskar when he brought the payment in. And that him stealing back the child leads to the trackers going off for all of the bounty hunters. And it looks like Mando's in a bad situation. He's going to have trouble getting on his ship to get out of there. And then the scene that really made it for me is when the Mandalorians come out of the sky, all of them all at once. They come out of hiding, which they've been relegated to hiding, to only come out one at a time. To preserve their way of life. So they all come out of hiding. They fly out of the sky. You got that heavy infantry Mandalorian with the giant guns, and just a really exciting sequence. And then it's all capped off with Mando giving the child the little ball again from the control unit, and they're on their way. But
yeah, great action in that one. Great battles. And I think that's the one where, when he's sneaking back after he changes his mind about leaving the child, right?
Yep.
He's sneaking back in. It shows like all of his stealth capabilities and all of his weapons. And it's just like, he gets that. It's cool how he gets those upgrades from the armorer.
Yeah.
It's almost like a video game. Like as you level up, you get like a new shoulder pad, a new chest plate, a new weapon, and you just knew he was going to use it right away next time he got in a crowded situation. So that was pretty fantastic right there.
I also really enjoyed, because this is my number 3, so I'm just going to kind of
you're jumping ahead here.
Tag along here. I really enjoyed the interaction between the armor and Mando, because I feel like she had a big part in helping him figure out that he had to go back to get the child. When she's talking about how she'll use his extra Beskar payment that he has to make a signet, and she's going to make it of the Mudhorn that was defeated. But then he's like, that's not a good idea because I didn't beat it by myself. I had help. And she's like, well, what was the help from? And then he goes into the detail about how it was his opponent, and she's like, how did you get some opponent to help you, or like enemy? And he's like, well, they didn't know that they were my enemy. And I think that's when it like clicked for him, like, this is not okay. This creature might be 50 years old, but like it's very helpless in many ways. And also very helpful in a lot of ways. Like it shows wisdom and helplessness at the same time. I just really enjoyed the interaction between the two of them, and that's why it made it into my top 3. And also the Mandalorians coming to the rescue.
I think that what you just described of like is very much like a classic spaghetti western sequence of like the cowboy is just doing their job. They just took a job, and then their moral compass comes into play. And you already like the guy because he's like a badass and he can do all sorts of cool stuff, and you kind of like you kind of visualize yourself as that main character. But then when they make that moral judgment, you appreciate him that much more.
Do you imagine yourself as the Mandalorian, Baxter?
It wasn't just when the show came out. I've always kind of kept to the creed of the Mandalorian, but we kind of keep underground.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's got a helmet in the closet there. I think that's one of the things though about never seeing his face. It does kind of make you think about that a little more. Like that could, I could be in that position. That could be me.
Yeah, a lot of inner reflection and like nature versus nurture, like what way are you going to go kind of stuff. It definitely, you see a lot of like dilemma come up throughout the entire season, let alone this episode where, you're trying to choose the right path and figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
So Nate, your number 3
My number
was
3.
Chapter 5, The Gunslinger.
Well, now that Crystal jumped ahead and told her number 3, I know it was the same as yours, but whatever.
Yeah, skip me.
Yeah, so my number 3 is Chapter 5, The Gunslinger. And this is like the lowest rated episode, I guess, for chapter. But I loved it because it starts out with a dogfight, and then where does he go? He goes to Tatooine, which is a name we remember from possibly the first
Indiana Jones.
Indiana Jones Part 3. So yeah, I love this because he's an outcast from the guild at this point. This happens right after Sanctuary, so he's kind of on the run from pretty much everybody in the universe at this point, and he heads back to Tatooine, and the first place he goes with the ship is Mos Eisley, which we remember from the other movies.
Indiana Jones.
And he's getting the ship worked on by Peli Moto, or how do you say it? Peli Moto?
Yeah, played by Amy Sedaris.
She's pretty funny in that she's yelling at him to like raise the child better. And this whole thing is he's not a guy that wanted a child, but now he's stuck with this child, and he's trying to like, maybe he can get rid of it, but in the meantime, he's taking care of this thing, right? So she kind of yells at him a little bit. She yells at him about the ship being all beat up. He's like, I don't want any of this. I'll get some money and I'll take care of this. And he heads out to the cantina from Star Wars 4 New Hope, and he's looking for some work, and he runs into a young bounty hunter sitting at the same exact booth as Han Solo, with his feet up and all cocky looking, just like Han was, but yet he's got like the naivety of like a young Luke Skywalker. So he's kind of a combination of the two, which I thought was super awesome. And he's looking for some help, and so Mando helps him out. And they get on what I thought was actually speeder bikes, but it turns out I think they're supposed to be called swoop bikes, because they're like a different. If you look at them, they are built differently, and these are more like I guess you would call it like the difference between like a Harley, something like that, and like a crotch rocket is basically like a speeder.
Sure.
So these things are like faster, but they're not you can't control them as well.
Sure.
So these things, they take these things and they're cruising across the desert for to try to find the assassin, and that whole battle's cool. How they're kind of like on the low ground, they're getting shot at, and they're like, what are we supposed to do? The whole interaction there with using the flares to like blind her. I thought it was cool, like showing that whole kind of military strategy of how do you defeat a sniper. I mean, they're up on the the high ground of the tower, and they're shooting at you. What are you going to do? So I thought that was cool. And then of course, I guess I just love like the double crosses and the twists where he kind of screws Mando over and kills her and goes after him. He captures the child, and then the flares come back into play at the end, and Mando kind of takes him out. Yeah, it's very cool plot. I love some of the lines. I love the line that the guy's name was Toro Calican, and the line that he says where he's like, where he smashes the beacon so that Mando can't really like take the bounty for himself.
Yeah.
And he says, "Looks like you're stuck with me now, partner." That's straight out of Indiana Jones, of course, where she says, "I'm your goddamn partner now." So I love that line, of course. The bartender droid was actually voiced by Mark Hamill. You may remember
Love
that
that.
name. Kind of tied into Star Wars. We had Tusken Raiders. We had Dewbacks. I mean, this was just the classic episode. I don't understand why it's not on your lists. It's crazy.
Well, we knew Grandpa Nate would have those on his list. So,
well, yeah, you guys weren't born yet when Star Wars came out. You guys, that's why you love the new movies, because you're like, I was a kid and I saw the new movies and they were fun. No, they weren't.
I'm right in between the two of you.
They were made for me though, like the newer movies.
They were,
so
yeah.
you know, it's fine if you just want to stick and stay with your old stuff. That's okay.
I like the old ways. It's the way.
I thought you meant like, do you want to stick like a stick in a hoop?
Like a stick in the mud, more like.
I like to go out back and throw horseshoes around now and then.
Yeah, great episode. Also, the introduction of Fennec Shand, played by Ming Na Wen, who is known from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and a few other shows.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah, she's pretty great on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Just that crossover of the Disney world, how they like to have their actors in multiple franchises is pretty exciting. But another character where there's going to be a lot more of that character down the road.
Yeah. So did she die at the end or not?
We don't know.
And we did see some mysterious footsteps. We saw legs approaching her at the end. Who knows who that could be?
Yeah, we don't know what happened to her.
So you already covered your number 3, Crystal, because you were jumping the gun,
I wasn't jumping the gun. I just, two birds, one stone, I think is something that, Nate, can you tell me, do people say that? Did they used to say that?
No, I was allowed before that even.
I think she's calling us stones.
Yeah.
But anyways, I went with Chapter 7, The Reckoning, which, if you'll note, we actually covered all 8 episodes in our top ranking here. So
that's very cool.
That's really
how
dope,
smart we are.
Yeah, it just goes to show, though, the balance and the quality of these episodes. All of them, 1 through 8, are awesome. Like, there's not an episode where you're like, I wish they wouldn't have done that. It's a high quality show, and I think limiting it to 8, them only doing 8 episodes, though we probably would have wanted more. That's how you keep the quality level high, is you just, really focus on these episodes. Aren't even an hour long. So, but I went with Chapter 7, The Reckoning, which is the second last episode. There's a plan to use the child as bait. That's Greef Karga's idea. Use the child as bait so they can get in, and Mando can kill the client. He's only supposed to have 4 men with him. But there's that great scene around the campfire where those creatures start swooping in and taking people away and flying away with their rides. And just a very another exciting moment in the season. Greef Karga gets injured. The child uses the Force to heal him, which in turn is a change in heart for Greef Karga, who then lets them know that his plan was actually to kill Mando and Hera and take the child, but instead he shoots his own men. And this is the grand first appearance of Moff Gideon, played by Giancarlo Esposito from Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul. Now he's in another legendary series here as Moff Gideon. Seems, he's like a quintessential Star Wars bad guy. His outfit is kind of like a Darth Vader outfit minus the helmet.
Yep.
later in the series, his like saber is revealed, which I think we'll talk about more later. And even though it's like a really sad moment in the series when Queel dies, that whole sequence leading up to that of him riding with the child to get away, it's just like you're on the edge of your seat rooting for him to get away. I just felt like this whole episode really had a lot of emotional pull, where there were a lot of scenes that really had you on the edge of your seat feeling for the characters. So that's why it made my top 3 in my third spot.
Yeah, that one's great. I think it flows right into episode 8 pretty much, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like those two are kind of like one long sort of end of the season.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, great way to wrap it up with the real villain coming in and all the battles that happen in that when they blast through those windows and they're trying to escape. I actually forget which one's 7 and which one's 8. That might actually be episode 8. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that 1 through 3 and then 7 and 8, those are like, they feel like big arcs.
That's definitely the big plot arc episodes, or I keep calling them episodes, but they're called chapters. It's kind of that model where you have the overall arc that's always going on, but then you have some sideline episodes, kind of like an X-Files model. Where you have like Sanctuary or the Gunslinger or the Prisoner. Those kind of, like you said, those are kind of sideline storylines.
Yep.
They don't really advance much, like with the child or with the villains. So,
but they allow for like great storytelling and great character introduction.
Yeah, development and storytelling, which I think is great. We don't always want to see the overall huge story every time.
Yeah, and it gives you a break too from it. Otherwise, I think you'd get bored. By the 5th episode, you'd be like, "Oh, we're still here." And I think that's kind of what you're talking about, Raised by Wolves earlier. That's kind of where I was at with that series. Was like halfway into the series, I was kind of like, "Oh, we're still on the same storyline." But once they can start shaking things up, then they alleviate that. But in a series like this, they're able to take an episode and do a side adventure. Even like Sanctuary, you think that the child is going to be safe there, and then you find out it's not. So you think there's an end to the means there. And
with this season, you also, the only 2 characters who are in every episode are the child and the Mandalorian. So it relies very heavily on their interactions with other characters. So having a lot of other characters is going to make it much more interesting than if it was just like the same core of people in every episode, or like switching out far fewer people. I think that they did a really great job of bringing on a large enough cast that keeps everything fresh and interesting throughout the entire season.
Yeah. Speaking of characters that come in and speaking of Sanctuary as well, I have one more fun fact about that episode, if you'd like to hear it.
Oh, yeah.
We really need a fun fact graphic.
Yeah. So here's a little fact about episode chapter 4, Sanctuary. Pedro Pascal never acted in that whole episode other than his voice.
Huh.
You guys hear that? I heard that.
Yeah, I heard that about that there were several moments where he wasn't able to participate in acting, so they had like stand-ins who like rehearsed specifically to like perform movements like he had been doing, so that it would appear flawless, whether it was him or his stand-ins doing the acting.
Mannerisms, I guess you could say. Yeah. So that was kind of cool. I mean, that's the benefit, I guess, of having a character who's completely covered head to toe, right?
Yeah, it could be anybody.
Same size.
It could be me. It could be me, guys.
I mean, yeah, you're, well.
Oh, we're revisiting this again already.
You might be a little too short for that.
I got those platforms. I got those Gene Simmons shoes.
Gene Simmons shoes.
That sound means it's time for our newest segment on the Collect and Destroy podcast, the Super Team Up. In this week's Super Team Up, myself, and my guests, we are Din Djarin, the Mandalorian, and we're about to embark on a high-stakes, hired gun mission, and we need to put together a team of 4 additional characters, good or bad, from Season 1 to ensure ultimate success of our mission. Crystal, you're up first, so let's take a look at your team.
All right.
Oh boy, let me see this here.
I guess I'll just give like a rundown. I have the child. I have IG-11. I have the armorer, and I have Fennec Shand on my team. And then obviously there's myself, Din Djarin, as well on the team. For my choices, I thought that the child would be an obvious one because he is small but wise. We're giving a thumbs down already, everyone. Thanks, Nate. So the child, for me, the fact that he can use the Force is really crucial. He has come in and saved people's butts quite often in the first season, and I think that that's only going to increase as the series continues. I also think that he is a highlight of
cuteness,
but also like
cuddliness,
something worth fighting for. Like there's something going on here where like everybody wants him, so clearly there's a reason that he should be around. Whether it's for negative uses or positive uses or just something neutral. I think that the child is somebody that you want to have around just in case. He also can use the Force to heal you, so that's kind of a big one. IG-11, I think, is important because he's precise, he's battle ready, he also is able to be manipulated, to be strictly like kill mode or a little bit of kill mode mixed with I'm a nurse.
a killer nurse. Very
he's a droid, right, so you can repair him. You can also use IG-11 to repair other things. The armor I chose because you're always going to need armor, and she's going to be able to help you out in a pinch. She also showed some pretty good battle skills when she was holding off the opponents who were coming after the Mandalorian at the end of the season. So I think that she would be valuable in several skill sets. And then Fennec Shand, we don't get enough Fennec Shand in this first season, so I'm really hoping she's not dead and that she shows up again, because all that we're hearing about her is that she's like this trained assassin. She's been doing it for a while. Obviously, people want her dead for a reason, so she must be good at what she does. And like, obviously, being like a sharpshooter kind of person, she's got to be stealthy. So there would be uses for that. And then just to revisit the child once more, because I feel like Nate's thumbs down really struck a chord with me.
All right.
He can fit into tiny places. So if you need to go get something, he's like your little baby hands. Groot. You can go have him put a little bomb in somewhere. There's value in the child.
All right.
Just wait till you see Nate's list. It's 4 Jawas.
He's small and he's slow.
And one Mudhorn.
I do agree with your Fennec sniper choice. I almost chose her. So good call there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm interested to see where our overlaps are here with our 3 teams. So want to take a look at Nate's team?
Let's do it. Oh yeah, look at that. That is quite a team there.
Nice.
Yeah, that's a good looking team. Let's start with Queel. I chose Queel. He's a retired Ugnaught vapor farmer, which is very funny. But the big
we know you're fond of vapor farmers.
Yeah, I just think that's cool that they brought a vapor farmer in. The thing about him is he's a gentle, wise old soul. He's going to be like the core of your team. He's caring, he's wise, gentle. He's great at crafting and mechanical and engineering type skills. He can build a lot of things or repair things. He can even do programming on droids. He's a good negotiator. We saw that with the Jawas. That could be very useful. What about this? He's a blurg wrangler. Come on. He can teach you to ride blurgs. Amazing skill. And also, you brought this up. He's a small of stature kind of guy. So he doesn't take up much room. He can get into these small spaces. He can fix things. It's, come on. It's a no-brainer. IG-11, I do agree with your IG-11 choice there. He's an assassin droid. I mean, he's awesome with... he's super strong. He's got tracking software. You've seen him shooting in front, behind, to the sides, up, down, all over the place, multiple arms spinning. He can be programmed easily for alternate duties. He can communicate with computers on ships. The classic like plug in and spin style interface, which we all love. He's got a damn plasma cutter for cutting stuff. He's got a back to spray for wounds. I mean, what more can you say about this guy? He's got a self-destruct thermal detonator inside his chest. So he can definitely help you out of sticky situations. I guess we saw that in the last episode. So, he did destroy himself, but he saved everyone else. Up next, we got Xi'an, the Twi'lek. I kind of just threw her in there just for kind of a little bit of fun. She doesn't really have a lot of skills, and she's kind of nasty. She was
like a knife expert.
But she's crazy, and she's awesome with knives. I mean, she can throw knives like a machine gun. Okay, that's pretty cool. What is that going to do against armor? I don't know. Occasionally, she'll slip one through. She did it with Mando. She has a streak for loving violence, which is kind of crazy, but kind of fun in a way. She's going to get into some crazy situations. It's going to entertain everybody on the crew. All right. Some people have said she's kind of like a Harley Quinn kind of character, but I think that's mainly because of it almost looks like she's got the double, whatever you call those things that girls do with the hair flying all over. Pigtails or whatever. And she's got that attitude of being kind of like excited by, the violent situations and that kind of thing. But I think she's kind of a cooler version of that.
Yeah, wild card.
And we already mentioned the knife throwing skills, which, I mean, is always cool to see knives flying through the air. Then we got, of course, I had the Cara Dune. I'm surprised. We haven't seen Cara Dune yet, but I'm sure we will here. She's an ex-shock trooper turned mercenary. Awesome brawler, hand-to-hand combat. She's going to beat the shit out of anybody that gets close. But she's also got that huge machine gun on the hip right there. Heavy gunner and brawler, and she's a woman. Awesome. I almost did an all-female team, actually. I was going to have the armorer and Fennec, and then Xi'an and Cara, which would have been cool too. But I didn't, because I wanted IG-11 in there. Cara Dune, she's also got weapons and battle tactics training. We saw her train a whole village. And she's also a field medic. We saw that she had the field kit there when she worked on, who did she help? I think did she help Mando or somebody? I forget. Yeah. And her extreme hatred of the Imperials, which would be awesome against most enemies in this show, are probably going to be something to do with the Imperials. So that's my crew.
It's good. Quality. Now I'm going to give you guys the actual answers.
Give us the second best one here.
All right.
Or third best.
All right. So on my team here, I've got Mando, who I often see a lot of myself in. Cara Dune, the child, the heavy infantry Mandalorian, and IG-11. So, starting out, I've got Cara Dune here. She's strong. She's a former soldier. I mean, everything that Nate already said about her. Good in hand-to-hand combat, good with firearms. I also, considered her giant gun. Like, that thing is a beast.
Yeah, that's a beast.
She can do some major damage with that. I also thought the biggest thing with Kara was like, if something were to happen to me, she could also lead the team.
Oh, okay.
Also,
That'll
if you
probably
need to
happen.
split,
Yeah.
also if you need to split up the team, you could also have her lead one squadron of your on your mission. I think leadership is pretty important in this, and I probably wouldn't put the child in charge of a squadron of soldiers. But I do have the child on here, and for everything that Crystal had said, I mean, he's got the force. I mean, the fact that he stopped the Mudhorn right there, that's a lifesaver. He's got the healing capabilities. There is a little bit of risk. There is a little bit of risk because you have to look out for him. But that's where IG-11 comes in. He's also a nurse droid.
You brought a baby on your team.
He IG-11
Both
going
you
into
guys.
battle in chapter 8. There was no problem with him having that little baby around his.
Chose cute and cuddly.
So I think them as a pair. I don't think I would have the child without IG-11. But IG-11 makes the team just based on when he shows up in that showdown and he's just taking out everyone, and then he's able to cut through that metal grate that no one else could cut through. So the Mandalorian, Cara Dune, they're no slouches. But they couldn't get through that grate to escape, and that was a matter of life or death. So once IG-11's in there, he's able to cut that open. And then I have the heavy infantryman Mandalorian because firepower. Just purely based on if I'm going on a mission, I want to be aggressive. I want to go in there and take out all these fools and put an end to all the business and get out of there, get my stack of Beskar, get some nice shiny armor.
I almost put that big boy on my team.
Yeah, good call on the big boy.
Yeah, he's a good one.
Plus he can fly. So
man.
that's like a big benefit of being able to fly around. Now, granted, Din Djarin did just get that rocket pack, but like he doesn't really know how to use it yet. So to have somebody to be able to like fly in or out of a situation, I think is key.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, you got some real heavy artillery on your team there.
And he also showed like really good loyalty, like in the season. You see he had conflict with the Mandalorian, and then he was like, but I still am going to ride for you at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like us and Nate. Like there's a lot of friction.
I don't know.
But in the end of the day, Nate's always going to be there to kick the door down and kick some ass. So
I kind of have the cuteness of the child, but also like the power of like IG-11, really.
Yeah, and you're kind of a wild card like Chien.
And I'm kind of cute and sassy like Cara Dune.
But you're also very matter of fact like Kuil.
Yep. I got
Nate just like comes here and he's like, these are my team members. I have spoken.
I've got the age and wisdom of Kuil.
All right, so those are our super teams. Those are the teams we're sticking to and we're going into battle with. So let's change subjects a little bit. Let's get a little bit into the origins of the Mandalorian series here. This all starts going back to 2009 when there is proposed live action Star Wars TV series. This is still working with George Lucas, I believe, at this time. But it was just deemed too expensive to produce.
Yeah, this is before they were purchased by or before Lucasfilm went to Disney. Yeah, so
right. Yeah, that was
more of a George Lucas situation.
And I believe there were a handful of scripts for this, right? For that original series.
Yeah, I heard. What did I hear? It was a huge number. Like I want to say like 50, but that sounds like super high. But I think it was a huge number of scripts.
Yeah, I think it was 50. But yeah, it was just too expensive. And I even saw some of the test footage, and I'm actually quite thankful. I'm actually thankful for a lot of things since Disney has taken over. I mean, just putting actual Star Wars fans in charge of Star Wars.
Yeah.
Is how you avoid things like the Crystal Skull from happening. take it out of the
What's
hands of
that?
people.
What's Crystal Skull?
It's something I heard about once on a podcast. It's Shia LaBeouf's largest film ever.
Oh yeah.
Aliens. But
Aliens.
I actually saw some test footage and I was unimpressed. Like it was really dark looking, like dark space looking. It kind of had the feel of the Star Wars prequels when they're like on Coruscant with all the like ships flying around.
Yeah. Why do you have to add so much complexity and political and just the huge urban areas to Star Wars? Like that's not the Star Wars that I like. Yeah. So I
and
like the back alleys.
And that show was like, I saw the making of the test footage and it was all green screen. Like everything was green screen. It was one of those things where the actors are acting in made up green screen scenarios. And that's what's refreshing, I think, about the Mandalorian series is the use of practical effects.
Yeah, definitely.
They're abound.
I love that they latched onto that right away. Like they want to actually create ships and they want to actually create puppets, even if it's originally just to kind of use the models as reference for CG and then use them both like in tandem, use the models to kind of make sure the CG looks great and use the CG to do what the models can't do. I mean, that's like the best of both worlds.
Yeah, that was a really sorry.
Go ahead.
That was a really big thing with the child is like they spent $5 million to build that puppet. And then they only used CG where it would be appropriate. Like it was specifically CG that would mimic the exact kinds of motions that the puppet would be limited to anyway, so that it looked seamless.
Sure,
like
yeah.
I couldn't tell you where one part begins and another part ends,
right?
Because I feel like the puppet and the CG came together so well, specifically on the puppet of the child. That was a great job.
They did that really well with like BB-8 too, where they had like an actual mechanical droid and similar to the original Star Wars films. But then in certain scenes, it'd be really hard to have like this thing actually fly through the desert and everything. So then they used the CG. In The Mandalorian, like you mentioned with the child, I think the best part is like just using the CGI to remove the cords running into the back of him.
Right.
Like,
yep.
That's like the most awesome and practical way. And I think you're seeing a shift. And I think Nate, you and I have touched on this before, but you're seeing a shift back to puppets, back to the real life. And before it was like, how far can we take the CGI? We're going to keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it until everything's made on a computer and you can tell it's made in a computer. And now they're pulling it back and using those things for those finesse details to make it more seamless.
I mean, it helps the actors too to work with actual things and not just maybe like a green ball on a stick. You know what I'm saying? It's like something's in front of you. You're going to respond to it. You're going to put yourself in the scene because you're actually there.
I do think that the green screen you're using right now, though, is pretty realistic.
It's pretty cool. I'm actually sitting in a storage container with just a blank wall.
You've got one of those suits on with all the little balls on it.
It's like a Masterpiece Theater background.
Your hair looks so real, Nate.
I'm actually an old man.
Speaking of those effects, though, you had said something, Nate, about them making a model of the Razor Crest, right?
Yeah.
Similar to like A New Hope?
Yeah, so I believe it was mostly kind of going to just be for like a model to just use as a reference, like I said, for some CG work they were working on. And then I think Jon Favreau became like a huge fan of it because he was like, well, if we make a model, not only will it be useful, but it's also something I can put in my home afterwards, right? So he was already thinking ahead to like after they use it. So they actually built like, it was like a 2-foot long, like really intricate model of this thing. And they 3D printed it and then they reassembled it because they were just like kind of 3D printed like the parts of it. So they built that and they used actual mocap kind of stuff, and like the long rail with the kind of like they did in the original Star Wars, where they actually kind of keep the ship on a platform that just kind of moves around on all the axes, and then they fly a camera past it, which makes the ship look like it's flying through space. So you have some kind of question here.
Yeah, so we've got a listener question. Best pet, Baby Yoda, Baby Groot, Baby Gremlin, or Baby Ewok? Crystal, I'll let you take this one first.
I don't want this one first. Well, they're all really cute. And this is a struggle for me because I would take one of each. You know, I hate to be the person who's like going with like the newest thing. Like, you know how you like throw out your like old thing and you got to get a new puppy, kind of, you know, like people that leave their dog on the side of the road. Like, I think that's so terrible, but I'm doing it right now because as much as I love Groot, Gremlins, and Ewoks, I want Baby Yoda. And it might just be because he's got the Force. I don't know. But I'm going with Yoda. Baby Yoda.
Nate?
Are we talking about Baby Gremlins or Baby Mogwai?
Well, it says Gremlin. I wouldn't want a Baby Gremlin.
No, I don't think you want Baby Gremlin.
But it doesn't specify. A Mogwai, I think, would be nice, but you have a big risk factor there.
I got to go with Baby Ewok. Because they have like those little hides they wear. Those are kind of like cute little outfits. And they got like spears. I don't know.
I see you dressing them up in like a little.
And the adult Ewoks, they look like babies.
That's
Why
true.
wouldn't you want that?
I think out of like longevity, I mean, Baby Yoda, he's already 50. So, you know, you're gonna probably be.
I'm near the end of my life already, so yeah.
Baby Yoda. So, I mean, Baby Yoda is gonna stay youngest the longest and cutest the longest, and like I could probably go to the doctor less because there's the healing properties of the Force. There's and just like protection, like home security. I probably also have to go with Baby Yoda, but like if the option were maybe a Mogwai, I really want to go Mogwai, but I like to stay up late. I like junk food, and
you like
there's
water.
a chance there's going to be like water like spilled around before the end of this podcast. So then I would just have like a room full of gremlins, and nobody wants a room full of gremlins.
Yeah, Ken did specify in the comments after our little discussion and said Mogwai is the version that he was talking about.
Yeah, one problem with Baby Ewoks too, though. Ewoks do eat humans, so that could be an issue. They eat,
But you're raising him, so maybe it's like
so it would be like a Tiger King kind of thing.
Vegan parents who raise their children vegan, it's kind of like that. Like, oh, we don't eat humans in this house. Like,
I know you're used to that, but we don't do that here.
Yeah, I mean it's a lifestyle choice, but if you under our roof, we don't do that. So we got a little sidetracked there. But going back to Origins, fast forward to the summer of 2017. That's when Jon Favreau has the plan for The Mandalorian, like an idea, and he pitches it to Disney. And surprisingly, from summer until November, in November, Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, is already announcing the show. And then 2 years from that November, the show is released. So like we're talking fast, like they were moving fast on this. Well,
he probably had a great story, so I think it's all about that. It's just like something that sounds awesome that actually works for the Star Wars fans, right? So
yeah, it was a super compelling story. So it's kind of something where you would be like, they would be stupid not to take this. And Jon Favreau is really, really good at what he does.
Yeah.
And he's very established. So it wasn't coming from somebody who like doesn't have any idea of what's going on in film. It's not coming from somebody who doesn't know what's going on in Star Wars. This was like the person that you want to have pitching a story to you about this subject. And he picked out just a really captivating story to be told. And I found it really interesting that he didn't actually direct any episode in this entire season because he was already working on the live action Lion King. So he was committed to that fully.
Oh, yeah, right.
But he just kind of helped the directors that he had put in place for each of the episodes. Like he was there for any questions and consulting on how best to direct each of these episodes to get this story across. So I thought that was really, really cool. Little tidbit of knowledge that he didn't direct any of the episodes, even though he created this show.
That's what I call a fun fact.
It is a fun fact.
I
I'm
heard
glad
that
I
he
could
wanted-
bring one.
We need a
Is
bell
that-
or something. You
Is
know?
that true that he wanted Vince Vaughn to play Mandalorian? Is that true?
Is it? I don't know. You heard that?
Because of, they were in Swingers and all that?
This is how rumors start, Nate.
Okay.
I will say though, when we talk about the trailer coming out and it being announced, his name, Jon Favreau, not Vince Vaughn, Jon Favreau being attached to it, I instantly had trust in the project. There's a handful of directors where they've presented us with certain things that like Taika Waititi, like anything that guy does, I know is
Right.
going to be gold. Christopher Nolan, I know it's going to be gold. I'd even say like somebody like James Gunn at this point. I'm curious to see his rendition of Suicide Squad that's going to come out because just
Oh, yeah.
creative
Work, yeah.
geniuses that are doing things and are they're empowered to make decisions that nerds like us will trust.
I thought it was cool. As far as directors for these chapters, like they had like what 6 or 7 different directors, right, on this,
Yeah.
from like a really varied background too. You mentioned what's her name, Howard. But there's also like Dave Filoni did like a couple, and I forget the names of the other ones offhand, but they were like all from different backgrounds, and they're like a really different kind of crew, which I thought was cool because all the episodes still have the right feel to them, and they still tie together, even with all the different directors. So
Right. Yeah. It didn't seem, I mean, like you could tell, like, obviously, like the episodes were a little bit different just in content. But as far as like directorial moves, I feel like they all paired very well. And Filoni actually was like one of the co-creators of the show. He
right.
was the one who started doing little rough sketches of Baby Yoda on little napkins as they were like working on other projects. So that's kind of where this idea of like a tiny Yoda, an even tinier Yoda,
He
I
was
guess,
obviously very drunk that night. Yeah.
came from. Yeah.
Another huge part of the Mandalorian season coming to be was the announcement of the Disney Plus streaming service, which at first, like at that time, it was like Netflix was it. Like Hulu is kind of doing some stuff, and there was some tertiary other streaming services, but it's before everyone started having their own, like HBO Max and all these. But it was a good reason for people to sign up. I think pretty much everybody I know signed up because of The Mandalorian. And you're like, oh, I get a 30-day free trial. And it's like, well, now you just keep it because it's not that much. And there's so many great movies and content and the entire, like all the Marvel movies, all the Star Wars movies,
all the Pixar. Yeah.
It's endless. And then when we talk about like inspirations for The Mandalorian, the film and the character, it's like heavily inspired by Clint Eastwood and his Man with the No Name character in the Dollars trilogy, the spaghetti westerns by Sergio Leone, as well as the samurai movies by Akira Kurosawa, which they actually inspired Leone's work. So it's kind of like one thing inspiring another, and then both of them coming to inspire this. And I didn't really I just kind of picked up on that after watching like 3 episodes. I'm like, oh, this totally has that that like Dollars trilogy vibe to it. But at the same time, we've never seen that incorporated into Star Wars yet. There was also mention of the inspiration of Han Solo on the actual Mandalorian character himself.
Yep.
So the man behind the mask, the Din Djarin character was voiced and primarily portrayed by Pedro Pascal of Game of Thrones fame, which we are all familiar with, playing Oberyn Martell. Obvious visual similarities to Boba Fett. But it should be noted that Boba Fett was not actually a Mandalorian. He wore the armor, and Jango Fett was a Mandalorian, but Boba Fett was a clone of an actual Mandalorian. So just kind of an interesting thing that he wasn't actually part of the creed of Mandalorians, and that Mandalorians are not actually an alien race or species, but a distinct ethnicity of human people from Mandalore and nearby worlds, united by a common creed with a strong warrior tradition.
I think I heard that Pedro thought he was going to be playing Boba Fett. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, that's like what I had read is that he took on the role, like he had already committed to it, thinking full well that he was going to be Boba Fett. And I think that's kind of like it was a common misread on what this series was going to be about, like before, because they weren't giving away too many details. It was just like, oh, the Mandalorian, like, oh, well, obviously it's going to be like Boba Fett. And also there was like that little that tease of us getting a Boba Fett movie, and people were kind of like, well, maybe it's going to be a series instead about Boba Fett. We're not really sure. There was a lot being kind of tossed around.
What's her name that plays Cara Dune again?
Gina Carano.
Gina Carano. I heard that she thought she was going to play a female Wookiee in this show.
Really?
You guys hear that?
No.
I can't tell if you're starting more rumors or not.
No, that's something I actually read. Yeah, isn't that kind of crazy?
We call those Nate Fehlauer fake facts.
Fehlauer.
There's fun facts and there's fake facts.
Fehlauer facts. Yeah, so she thought her face was going to be totally covered.
Wow.
The whole series, I guess.
It makes sense because a lot of this stuff is so people are auditioning for roles and they have no idea what the character is going to be. They keep it all close to the chest. I remember seeing like, oh yeah, now they're doing Disney Plus. They're going to do a Boba Fett series. Boba Fett's one of the favorite characters. And even the conversation of like, how did he get out of the Sarlacc pit? Like that was part of the making of the show. Like, how does Boba Fett get out of there? I think one interesting thing that I found out, looking a little bit more into the Mandalorian creed, is that they were known for riding mythosaurs. And mythosaurs were like these giant beasts. They were kind of like dragon-looking creatures. And that's actually the signature Boba Fett like skull, like tusk skull logo. That's actually a mythosaur skull.
Like, how big were they? Are they kind of like dinosaur?
They were like, I don't know. They look kind of like Asian representation of dragons, if that makes sense. Not too different from those creatures they were riding in, like, I think it was episode 2 of the prequels when they're riding those giant, like Obi-Wan's riding that like dragon creature. It was kind of like that.
I remember those movies. No.
No,
I saw those all like one time and that was enough.
You should revisit it. We can do an episode about the prequels.
Are they like the size of like Game of Thrones dragons?
No, they weren't. I don't think they were that big. I mean, maybe
they were big enough to ride.
Okay.
Yeah, they were definitely bigger than like dewbacks and wampas. Probably like
would you use a saddle or would you use a
bareback?
Never mind. I'm just trying to picture.
What's a size up from a saddle?
Hold on, let me draw you up a picture real quick.
Saddle or like a cart on top of a. No, I don't know. Cut that part out later.
The photos I've seen, they're riding right on the back of the beast.
Okay, bareback style.
I believe, yeah, classic Mandalorian bareback. We call that.
All right.
Uh,
That part out later.
So before we go on to the next thing, to touch on Boba Fett not being an actual Mandalorian, I did read that Boba Fett didn't have Beskar for his armor. That he used Duraplast, which is kind of a common stand-in for Beskar, because Beskar is it's a Mandalorian type iron, so it's not super common, and that's kind of why when you see the client bring out the case of Beskar, like the Mandalorian's kind of like, where did you get that? So there's like that aspect of things, and also it's not something that people who are not Mandalorian can can transform into armor. It's difficult for people to work with. So having the armor in this series is really important, as far as him getting actual Mandalorian iron armor.
Right.
well, and we don't know that it was the last we've seen of her either.
That's true.
Yeah.
I would like to
you
see
know.
more of her. I think that she's really great.
Beskar armor, I've read that that's lightsaber proof too. Is that correct?
Oh, I don't know.
Can anyone verify or deny that?
I can.
That sounds like a fun fact for season 2, Nate.
Well, that would be pretty interesting. I also thought it was interesting that Mandalorian, he has all this armor, but there's so many gaps where he just has cloth. You know, what's going on?
I
with
think
that?
it's very it goes back to that samurai thing too. Like,
yeah, he's just got like the whatever you call the cuirass and the pauldrons and all the pieces, but they don't all like seam up. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
There's
it's
a lot
not
of room.
impenetrable.
There's a lot of room for penetration.
I'm sure it's for movement. Like it's probably all based on being able to be like fight the way that he fights with flexibility and speed and agility.
Yeah, not be too stiff.
Yep. Well, yeah, he wears it all day long, every day. Doesn't ever take it off. So
Yeah,
for
breathability
comfort,
too.
you know.
So the music of Star Wars is a very defining part of Star Wars in general, like the whole franchise. And the music in this series is no exception, but it's like uniquely its own. Crystal, do you want to like expand a little bit on Ludwig Göransson and the amazing score that he has put together for this first season?
Sure. Ludwig Göransson is a quite famous and decorated music producer as well as composer. He is well known for producing most, if not all, of Childish Gambino's albums, which clearly are good enough to win Grammys. So that's a notable feature of Ludwig Göransson. He also composed the music for not only this season of The Mandalorian, but he did the music for Black Panther, which won an award. I think an Oscar. He also did Fruitvale Station, which is a really good movie about the death of Oscar Grant at the hands of the Oakland BART Police Department. He did both the movies Creed 1 and 2, the music for those, which all of those, like the 4 that I just mentioned, have Michael B. Jordan in them, and are highly recommended. And then he most recently did the music for the movie Tenet that just came out this year. Really great.
Excellent.
Soundtrack to that. The original score is beautiful. Definitely, he's got a gift for fitting any kind of sound to the pace of whatever you're watching, which I had no idea leading into this, anything about this guy really. But once I kind of dipped my toes in, I was like, wow, he's actually responsible for a lot of stuff that I'm really into. And most recently, just last month in September, The Mandalorian, and Ludwig Göransson won an Emmy for Outstanding Music Composition for The Mandalorian.
The you know, a lot of the key instruments he played himself, as well as adding the 70-piece orchestra. And I think one cool thing they did with this series is each chapter of the show, each episode, had its own soundtrack album that dropped the same day that the episode aired. So you can watch the episode, and then now you have a whole album for that specific episode.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, he wrote like over 4 hours of music for this. It's pretty incredible.
Nate, what came to mind? We're in episode, you know, chapter 1. You first hear this music. What were your takeaways? Like, what did you think of that new sound?
I think it's just what did you call it? The bass recorder?
Yeah, the bass
It's like
recorder.
a long tubular instrument. Just sounds so exotic and so like just primitive, like indigenous kind of earthy sound. It just kind of really set the stage, I think, as far as audio for this whole series, and just kind of, you know, that sort of you felt like you were out in, you know, in the middle of nowhere, basically, with this music.
Yeah.
It's the music of like the wilderness, basically, I feel.
Yeah, and I thought that it also echoed like those old westerns, like the Morricone
Right.
type. He always had like interesting percussion instruments and woodwind instruments in those old spaghetti westerns, and then you almost hear that echoed in this type of a Star Wars feature. As we all know, Star Wars likes to work in Easter eggs and references into their content across the board to, you know, overall expand and connect its canon across the board. You know, from movies to the animated shows to even the books and comics, they always kind of work in characters and scenarios in. And, you know, in The Mandalorian, I mean, there's things from mentioning Life Day to the stormtroopers that Crystal had mentioned earlier with bad target aim. Like, that's always been a joke since the beginning movies about, oh, stormtroopers have terrible aim. And now they bring that back in a TV series, and they actually make a joke out of it with some comedic actors. So this series is is jam-packed. There's no exception to having Easter eggs. Was there anything, Nate, that you had noticed while watching the series?
Yeah, for sure. Like you said, there's so many things, but yeah, here it is. You know, right away, episode 1, we're walking through a small marketplace in this small village, and they have these. They're called Kowakian monkey lizards. Mostly well-known. The most well-known one is obviously Salacious Crumb from Jabba's palace.
Classic.
In Return of the Jedi. And it was just such a funny shock, and just, I don't know what to say about it, just to see this little creature who was so full of life and humor just roasting on a spit. I mean, I didn't know what to, I just had to laugh, but I was also like, wow, that's messed up, because they're kind of sentient beings. Like, they had like thoughts, and like mostly they're kind of used for court jesters, kind of like they're just silly little creatures, right? I mean, they're basically like monkeys.
Well, and they even have another one watching him. Like,
yeah, and there's another one in a cage. Like, and he clearly understands what's going on. Like,
Yeah.
he's not like a chicken in a cage or something. He sees that he's next in line. So it's just like, it's just one of those brilliant little, like, if you look away, you may even like miss this moment, but that's why you got to pay attention, because there's these shows. I mean, these shows are like 35 minutes. They're packed with, you know, whether it's dialogue or visuals. Like, there's so much to see and hear in these things.
Yeah, that's also like where I mentioned about fans making new content. Like, fans are the ones that are going to work these kind of things into it.
Yeah,
they're not just trying to be like, oh, you want to see him as a little boy? Like, oh yeah, Boba Fett is cool. You want to see him as a little boy?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much in the Star Wars universe to go back to, or to go to any source and like the wealth of knowledge online, and there's all these characters and these little creatures and things, but to see like something come back from like, so long ago. I don't know if there's been a mention of this kind of monkey lizard in any other shows since Return of the Jedi. I can't think of any.
No, I read a book called you guys are gonna laugh, but it was like Tales from Jabba's Palace. And it was a series of short stories, and it's basically all the behind the scenes stuff that's cool. Going on around the time of Return of the Jedi, and then it's kind of like an anthology book, so they all kind of tie together in the end. But way to expand the universe.
Yeah, I always thought that was one of the cooler sets of the movies was Jabba's area, and that's where you kind of saw the Twi'leks too. The dancing girl.
Absolutely.
Who can forget that? I mean, that's.
Well, as well as like you see two different types of Twi'leks too, because you have Bib Fortuna there,
super ugly one,
yeah, and like you're like, okay, so and you kind of see that in the prisoner episode too, the difference between the brother and sister, like different types. Crystal, what did you notice while watching The Mandalorian?
So one of the most amusing things that I took note of was when the client brings Mando his Beskar payment, he brings it out in this little carrying case that looks kind of interesting. It looks a little bit like an ice cream maker. And I learned that this actually is something that the creators made canon to Star Wars lore because it is a throwback to this random guy who is fleeing Cloud City in Empire Strikes Back, and he happens to be carrying an actual ice cream maker, and everyone was kind of like, what are you doing? Like, I guess it kind of like an ice cream maker kind of looks a little futuristic or space-like. It's a little bit weird looking. So they had used that as a prop in Empire Strikes Back, and the creators of The Mandalorian were like, we need to canonize this. Let's call it a Camtono. So now it's an actual piece of Star Wars lore. I just found that so hilarious. I'm always good for a little Easter eggs like that, little nuggets of like throwback info that you can obviously, like we just spoke about, you can tell that people who love Star Wars are making this show.
Well, and when you're like an obsessive fan of a franchise like Star Wars, something that was like a split second set decision of like, oh yeah, just wear that or just use that. Like, of course, those are the things that fans are going to latch onto. So then, you read about them on the internet for decades, like little things like the ice cream maker. And then what better way to like memorialize that and like canonize it than to put it in a very important scene here. And then you see Mando carrying that case around.
There's actually something in the Gunslinger chapter where Pelimoto, the lady that is the mechanic, one of the device that she holds up to his ship to like scan his ship is actually something that's a Black & Decker thermal detector in real life.
Huh.
It's like literally like the device that you can buy online or wherever in the hardware store.
Yeah.
Or that contractors use to like scan for, I don't know, some sort of thermal purpose. But it's like literally not even modified. Like she just holds it up and quickly you see it on screen. Like those little things like that, like, oh yeah, what looks cool and like kind of futuristic, just grab it and just use it,
Yeah, exactly.
Practical objects for impractical uses.
Like super practical objects, because like you literally go buy it down in the hardware store.
It makes it for really good, easy cosplay.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, I say Nate's selling them on eBay right now for double the price. So one of the Easter eggs that I noticed, and I absolutely love this, is back in 1979, I believe they made a Imperial troop transporter toy. So this toy was to essentially transport your little 3 3/4 Kenner action figures around. So it looks like a ship. It's got a little turret on the top, and you can hold how many figures? It can hold like 11 figures. And it appears, though, in real life in Chapter 7 of The Mandalorian. So that toy was made, never have been in a movie. It's just basically a figure carrier. It never shows up in a movie after that. And now all these years later, it shows up in Chapter 7, The Reckoning, and again, making something that was from another form of media into the actual live action. And then they take it a step further now. It is now part of 3 3/4 vintage line of Kenner action figures. They made one that actually looks even more like the one from the TV series. So that's art awesome. Imitating life imitating art. I don't know what it is, but just really cool to see where something like that might begin and where it might end.
It's such a ridiculous transport with the guys just clinging on the sides of the vehicle like that. That's what makes it so funny.
Yeah.
Like, why would they be just sitting in little containers on the side of this ship? It's like not very practical. But
well, and there's so many toy lines. There's so many toy lines where like Masters of the Universe, where the toy came first and then they got to work it into the series, or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. They'd create a toy and then they'd figure out, how do we make this vehicle on the show? And this is one of those situations where they made a toy and it was never in a movie. And it really just had more of a functional purpose of carrying your figures to your friend's house. I never had the original, vehicle. But I can only imagine if you had played with that for 10 years of your life or whatever, from being a little kid. And then all of a sudden you're watching The Mandalorian at home with your own kids and you're like,
holy shit,
what is that?
That's going to put a grin on your face right there for sure. Yeah. Oh yeah. Speaking of grins on faces here. Mayfeld. So this is Bill Burr, famous comedian, and perfect just to have awesome one-liners in the chapter The Prisoner. But what I really loved was that he made a reference to, again, like this is going back to like, we knew the fans always made fun of the stormtroopers for their bad, marksmanship. And of course, everyone hates who? Jar Jar.
Not everybody.
Everyone hates Jar Jar.
Everyone on this podcast hates Jar Jar.
So they're able to take
Not
a jab,
everybody.
like basically, they're poking fun at themselves here. He's got the one-liner when they're talking about the Mandalorian, taking off his helmet, and they're making fun of him, like, "Oh, you can never take your helmet off. Like, is that really true?" And Shion's like, "This is the way." She's making fun of him, and Mayfeld says, "Huh,
that's pretty good.
I wonder what you really look like. Maybe he's a Gungan under there." And he's like, "Is that what you don't want to do with your face?" And he's like talking like a gun, like a Gungan, like a Yusa. You want to not show your face, and then
that was a less good.
I can't do the Gungan accent.
Can you do that voice for the rest of the podcast, please?
I can't do it. Yusa. But anyway, so he's making fun of the Gungans and he's making fun of Jar Jar. And it's awesome. It's a great little like poke at themselves.
These are those kind of jokes that like go over the heads of casual observers. Like, obviously, like this show has released, and like, what the good part about it is it can be a jumping place for a lot of people to get into Star Wars. I've heard a lot of people who are by Disney Plus, they're watching The Mandalorian because it's an excellent TV series, having no real previous experience with Star Wars. But jokes like this aren't for them; they're for us. We can really have some satisfaction in stuff like that.
Another Easter egg that I noticed was in the final episode, chapter 8, we see Moff Gideon hop into this TIE fighter, and he's, on the go, and he's about to attack Mandalorian and his little crew as they're trying to escape. And long story short, the Mandalorian brings down this TIE fighter with using an explosive that he attaches to it after he uses his jetpack for the first time. And the TIE fighter crashes. We're like, oh, maybe Moff Gideon's dead. But wait, we see this outline being drawn with something, we don't know what, to break open like a hole in the TIE fighter. And Moff Gideon steps out and he's holding this black colored lightsaber, which looks amazing and unlike anything that we've ever seen, unless you've watched Star Wars Rebels. So the dark saber is what it's called. It is a lightsaber traditionally bestowed upon the leader of the Mandalore. So how it's in Moff Gideon's hands, we don't really know. The only thing we know about this from the other shows or movies is from Star Wars Rebels, which is an animated series of Star Wars. When Sabine has the dark saber and bestows it upon Bo-Katan. So this is all Mandalorian stuff going on. It's in good hands, as far as we know, in Star Wars Rebels. So we're not sure how Moff Gideon got it. We can only assume that he has ill intentions with his desire for the child. Like everything that's going on right now with him is just like spells out bad news. So it's very interesting to see like what kind of happens there. And then like the little tidbit of, so this is something that the Mandalorians usually wield. Is it going to be something that our Mandalorian ends up with?
We may find out.
There's only one of those in the universe, a dark saber.
Yeah, I think it's the dark saber.
The one and only, I would assume.
But it's a good example of how something that was only shown in like the animated Star Wars world is now brought to life in the real, just like how Ahsoka is going to be in the new season
Very
of
cool.
The Mandalorian. And we'll touch on that a little bit later. This is probably my favorite Easter egg, which there's the legendary Star Wars holiday special. It is known for being horrible, like a horrible moment in TV history. But like within Star Wars, it's also like a cult classic. So you can't find it anywhere. I actually have a bootleg Blu-ray of it. So you can watch it for yourself if you would like to borrow it, anyone. But definitely worth checking out if you're a big Star Wars fan. You'll find some fun in it. But this is known as the official debut of Boba Fett. He wasn't in any movies yet at this point. So he shows up in this like animated short. And in that animated short, he has this unique like pronged rifle. It's known as the Amban Phase Pulse Blaster. Which in turn turns out to be the same rifle used by our boy Mando in season 1 of The Mandalorian, that he is blowing up Jawas. They're just exploding upon,
I love that.
as he shoots them. So I thought that was really cool. Again, to tie it back in, they do make mention of Life Day, which is also what the holiday special is about. Instead of calling it Christmas, they're calling it Life Day, the Life Day celebration. It's this like intergalactic holiday based on Christmas, essentially. But very cool to see that rifle, which you never see Boba Fett carrying in the movies, but to see that translated to real life with Din Djarin carrying that around. And it's very like a very iconic part of his ensemble at this point. So let's talk a little bit about the intergalactic phenomenon, the best kept secret of the show, the child, aka Baby Yoda. Crystal, how has Baby Yoda impacted your life?
Baby Yoda has made me want to be a better person. Baby Yoda has made me want to be a parent.
Oh, really?
Baby Yoda is just look at him.
Look at that face.
If you're not looking at us right now recording this, look at a Google search of Baby Yoda, the child. he's pure, he's innocent, he's wise beyond his years. I love Baby Yoda because he has brought people who don't watch Star Wars into Star Wars nerddom. So I can talk to literally anybody about Baby Yoda. And on top of that, like me as a little kid, I want Baby Yoda. Me as a 31-year-old lady, I want Baby Yoda. Me when I'm 80, I still want Baby Yoda. Like, this is a timeless character. I love him.
Nate, the big reveal at the end of chapter 1. Were you expecting it? What did you think?
No. And it was very strange to like see a tiny little green Yoda-like creature. My wife was actually sleeping during the episode of all things, and big surprise. And she like woke up like right at that moment and saw him on the screen, and she was just like, "Baby Yoda," and then she like passed back out. So, like, I mean, it was like instantly everyone across the world was calling him Baby Yoda, which which is so weird.
Yeah, part of
like
me
impossible,
like
because he's after Yoda, so he's not a baby of Yoda.
Yeah,
he
as
could
a
be the
nerd,
son of Yoda.
I'm like defensive right away as a nerd. I'm like, he's not Yoda. That's a different person. Yoda's not the species.
Yeah, it could be a son of Yoda, or maybe like a nephew or a friend's child, of Yoda's best friend's son, or
a nephew on his mama's side or something. Yeah.
And how do they know that he's a boy? Like, how do we know that?
The hints that I took were from, like, they were just cues from the characters in the show. Like, when they're on the forest planet in episode 4, Cara Dune says, like, it's going to break his little heart to take him away from this village because he enjoys it there so much. So I just took gender cues from the characters to figure out.
How did they know? I guess they.
Well, I would assume that
it's kind of like how we know about you, Nate. So
there's some kind of a communication.
But it is kind of funny that so the whole show is kind of about how Mando, he's like an accidental father to the child.
Yeah.
But he doesn't have like the usual extreme chores that a father would have, like the dirty jobs, feeding.
You're talking about like changing diapers?
Yeah, feeding, changing diaper, dealing with screaming like all night long. He's kind of an easy baby.
He is 50 years old. He is 50 years old. So I think some of those behaviors have probably already been taken care of.
Yeah, but the kid can't even talk.
And that's part of the cuteness, though, is like the fact that like he is like pretty self-sufficient, it seems like, even though he's also small and helpless.
Yeah, that's why he's like a perfect baby, because he's cute, he's got powers, and he's like easy to take care of.
Yeah, not like those human babies.
They don't show like the behind the scenes stuff though. Like it would be pretty like boring content to be like, oh, I gotta change the baby's diaper again. Come on. Like you would not continue to watch the episodes if you had to see Mandalorian change his dirty diaper 20 times a day, because that's the reality of parenthood.
Just wait till George Lucas releases the special edition. When he releases the special edition season 1, it'll be all everything. The behind the scenes.
It's
the extended director's cuts, and it's just
all these
dirty
CG.
Diapers.
It's gonna be just like 3 Men and a Baby, right? Like Ted Danson. I don't remember who else was in that movie.
So
Ted Danson.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Tom
Selleck, Indiana Jones.
So right now, I mean, you go to the store, you can't like go down a single aisle, whether it's clothing or toys or food or whatever. You're seeing these products everywhere, from the toilet hand sanitizer. I try to buy some cereal, and I got to pick up a family size box of Baby Yodas. And
hand sanitizer, so hot right now, so hot. It's a hot product of 2020.
Actually true.
So good.
So
What was
that
crap?
video right there that we just showed for you, those of you who are listening in, was of the animatronic, the child, I guess you'd call it a doll, from Hasbro. Just came out. So one of the interesting things with this whole Baby Yoda phenomenon is the producers of toys and anything else were not prepared for this. To preserve the IP security of this character, nobody was notified in advance. So as soon as this episode airs, everybody's scrambling to get their license approved, get their stuff produced. So for example, I ordered one of those animatronic Yodas right when it went on pre-order, and we still have not received it. And I don't think we're going to receive it until the new year. But that has like over 20 phrases and motions, and but surprisingly under $60. So pretty good value, and it looks like movie quality. Like it really, again, that was from New York Toy Fair this year, and it really was a big part of their booth and their showcasing within the Star Wars section. There's so many Mandalorian toys from Monopoly. They have Baby Yoda Chia Pets. I know, Nate, you've been a big Chia Pet collector throughout the years.
I love them. I can't get enough of trimming those little bushes.
The
I was gonna ask you, like, you can't wait to get that thing on your lap. That little baby.
I just can't wait to strap it to my chest like IG-11.
I can see Baxter wearing that like in a pouch as he walks around town, Providence. Little baby child.
Yeah, check me out on TikTok. So I think one of the core toy lines right now would be the Star Wars Black Series figures, which are Hasbro's 6-inch action figures. The 6-inch figures across the board, whether it's Marvel Legends, Star Wars, the G.I. Joe figures they just released, the 6-inch, like more detailed figures are huge. And along with that, they've released a full line of Mandalorian figures. So everybody from the armor to Mando and his starting outfit to the Beskar uniform, heavy infantry. It's really funny. You know, you buy the child figure and it's a very tiny package because he's a very tiny figure, and it's scaled to the rest of the toy line. They also, along with that, have the Star Wars Vintage Series 3 3/4 figures, which are more like your standard 3 3/4 from the 70s, late 70s and through the 80s figures, like your G.I. Joes. And it's interesting because even though this is a new property, they're releasing these figures by Hasbro, branded as Kenner, that really look retro. They really look like that old school packaging, bubble packaging, the old boxes. And it's a very nostalgic feel.
Yeah, those look amazing. They definitely captured the vintage retro style.
Well, and also, like, if there's one thing that toy makers know, it's that children who are playing with toys want their toys to match the toys that they already have. So making the 6-inch figures as well as the 3 3/4 ones, they're all stylized fairly similarly. It leaves you open to crossing over all these characters. And someday these kids who are playing with these toys now are going to be the people who are making Star Wars movies and shows down the road, because that's the recipe that's working right now, is having these people who are like taking this like hypothetical, like, what if we brought this person into this scenario? What if we, what if we could somehow make these pair up? Or like a descendant of this person pairs up with this. And I just think it's fantastic that you keep a consistency with toy lines like that. So even though like it looks retro, it's one of those things where you look at it and you're like, this is part of this set that my kid is collecting. So I'm able to pick it out in a store without being like, I'm not sure what size guys my kid wants.
Right.
Yeah, and it provides different price points as well. So, you can get the bigger, advanced, more expensive figures, or you for that same price, maybe you get two of the smaller figures. It makes it a little easier for grandma when she's shopping for Christmas. Like,
For sure.
do you get more bang for your buck with a bunch of small figures, or do you get the bigger one? Um, they've just done a really great job with that. And Nate, you'll appreciate with these 3 3/4 figures, even though they're similar to like the original 1970s Star Wars figures, the detail is getting more advanced as time goes on. So it looks like a retro package, but the figure itself, you get more accessories. There's more detail in the clothing and the design of the figures.
Right. Yeah. I'm always like going for the likeness. I want it to be like a tiny, real person.
Well, and I know you're familiar with like Hot Toys,
Yeah.
and Diamond Select Toys. They're doing those same like the really expensive like $500, $400 busts and figures. They're also doing those for the Mandalorian. Like there is for any time there's a license that becomes available for a new hot property that's taking the world by storm. So I think what you'll find now is like some of those things you'll be like, oh, I want more Indiana Jones. Well, Indiana Jones isn't the hot property right now. So they can't count on the more casual collectors and buyers to go and buy Indiana Jones. So they're not going to release the stuff. But something like Mandalorian, they can like capture that lightning in a bottle and they can release it all now. So maybe down the road, maybe 20 years from now, they won't be producing all these Mandalorian figures. But right now they're going to do the full line and you get to see the first time a character is introduced into a line is always very exciting. And again, Hot Toys, if you want those like hyper detail and the fabric outfits and all that kind of stuff. Another way that a lot of toy companies are going is like Hasbro. They have their HasLab, which is like their development lab where they crowdsource new, expensive, advanced toys. So this next one that they have coming out is the Razor Crest. I think previously the only Star Wars thing they had done like this was the Jabba's barge, which is scaled to 3 3/4 figures, but it's like a massive ship. And then you've got this ship, which is also very large. And these are, just some renderings right now of where they're at, but they need to get 6,000 back. Yeah, you need 6,000 backers to produce this. That's so you paint your own, Nate.
What's amazing about this is you actually with the Razor Crest ship. It's actually almost like a character on the show. You see the ship so much in each chapter, and the different areas from the cockpit to the weapons cache to the carbonite freezing chamber to the little baby Yoda bed chamber. To the exterior of the ship. You see it so much on the show. It's it's a must-have, I think.
Yeah, it develops the endearing qualities of like the Millennium Falcon. Which is that's a big lofty thing to say, but it really does give you that same vibe of there's so much happening in this ship that it kind of develops its own personality and it becomes a part of the general vibe of the show.
Yeah, that's a good point because I was going to mention that it was like second only maybe to Millennium Falcon as far as ships go in the entire
something that you would know inside and out.
Yeah. Because it's featured so much, just like the Millennium Falcon with the smuggler chambers to the place they play the little chess, whatever game that is, to the it's just used so much within the show there.
It becomes a place set more than just a vehicle.
Sorry, what was that? Yep, we got nothing there. But yeah, I mean, I just think what they've done with the ship on the show and like making it so much of a setting within each episode, I just think is just amazing.
I agree.
Yeah, it becomes more of a play set than just a vehicle. Like some toy lines, it's a vehicle to get your figure from A to B. But something like this with the Millennium Falcon, it's a setting for all the action to go down.
Yeah. You see, I mean, I guess that's what I was trying to say is you actually see scenes that take place in the cockpit. Like when he's playing with the toy, you see a couple different scenes with people looking in that weapons cache. It's not just a one-time, I'm seeing a guy flying in a ship. That's all I see of him.
Well, and they have renderings of the weapons cache, and apparently they're going to make all those weapons. So, like, this is not necessarily a project for children. Like, this is an advanced layout with all the features and all the tiny stuff. So the way this works is you get 6,000 backers to make it produced, which they've already hit that goal. And then they start adding with these crowdsourcing, they start looking at stretch goals, they call them. So every time they hit a new stretch goal, they add another feature or another figure or another expanded component to whatever it is that they're selling. So in this instance, once they hit 10,000 backers, they now add in a new exclusive, the child toy that is the 3 3/4 scale with the pram, which, is like the bassinet. And these, along with the Mandalorian figure that would be driving the ship, those are exclusive figures that you can't buy separately. And I've seen pictures. The child figure actually comes on a card just like any other action figure. So you could choose to not open that and just leave it on the card. But from a collectability standpoint, you can't go to the store and order that. You can't go online and order that. That's something that only comes if you make a purchase like this at that elevated price of, I think it's $350.
Yeah, it's $350. They just broke 10,000, like you said, 10,000 backers. And the fact that like they have all these stretch goals really makes it cool for people who are kind of like on the fence, like, do I want to buy it? I don't know. It's $350. But as you start adding more things and you see more people are getting invested in it, you're like, you know what? I should really just pull the trigger on this. I think it's time for me. Like this one sealed the deal. So like people who saw it reach 10,000 and see the Baby Yoda involved with it as well now are like, oh, maybe now's the time. This is what made me feel committed enough to spend the $350 to get it.
So I was going to add, I actually did one of these for Todd McFarlane he has a new Spawn figure coming out, and it was the same thing. It's like, okay, he's signed. And then when we hit one stretch goal, it switched over to real chains on the figure. And then it was multiple heads on the figure, multiple weapons on the figure. Like they kept adding these as the stretch goals went on. And the cool thing for me is I committed right away. So as people kept committing, I didn't have to worry about I didn't pay anymore. I didn't do anything, but all of a sudden the value of the product that I signed up for is going up as they're adding an expanded package and now this special sleeve and now this and that. So I think that's kind of where we're headed with a lot of this stuff, where they're doing extremely limited editions of a specific toy. And for McFarlane, the advantage is he's making millions of dollars, but he's selling this himself. He's not going through a retailer. I know with the toy industry, there's something where with clearance, toy companies lose money when toys end up in clearance. So with this, you can kind of operate outside of the system. It's a little more DIY, and it's also direct to the consumer. So us as the end user and fans, we're getting a little bit of a more special type of a thing. So with all major properties, there's a lot of artwork that goes along with that. And with the Mandalorian, there has been a plethora of really cool alternative movie posters. Granted, this isn't a movie, but we call those alternate movie posters, where artists are creating alternative artwork in poster format to go along with a movie, a TV show, something like that. Nate, I know you're a big collector of these types of pieces of art.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of people doing stuff outside of like the actual agency that's working on the what would you call it? The advertising for the show, like things like you said that are done outside.
Sure.
Um, just because it opens it up to be a lot more, showing a lot more different styles and different interpretations of the same characters and the same settings, but in different styles. There's some really cool stuff for those watching on screen here. This one's a really cool sort of Art Deco style, which goes in really awesome with just the style of the sci-fi style of spaceships and just the openings of portals and whatever. I mean, this thing's got really cool detail and I don't know what else to say about it, but yeah, it's cool to see the different styles that artists can come up with for these things, and different layouts. I mean, that one was very symmetrical. Another approach would be something more painterly, from a low perspective, different lighting.
I think even like working outside of like the color palettes that might be recognized for the show is always cool. You have a spot on your wall, but you're a huge fan of The Mandalorian. But maybe the posters that came out for the series aren't really your vibe or style, so you can get something that really defines, and maybe it includes some like secondary characters that weren't as prominently featured in the show.
I also I think it's worth noting that at the end of each episode, there's this really beautiful concept art that's shown, which is from like 6 different artists or something like that. Like they have all these different pieces of concept art, which for me, I'm like I guess I didn't really look it up in advance, but if that was like a coffee table book, it is something definitely worth investing in. The stuff that they did was so beautiful, and you pair that with like the music that's played in the end credits, and it's just really, it's very high end.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm glad
anytime.
I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to mention that too. I love that they show that concept art and that style, and it's not like an exact scene. I mean, it's concept art, so it's some of the characters look different, and there's a texture to it, and there's a style to it. I would just love to see like a graphic novel in that style.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of a realistic style, but it's stylized as well. It almost looks like a watercolor pen and ink kind of style. I
Yeah,
just
I
love
would.
those drawings, and I love to like see that after the episode, like a recap almost of all the major scenes. It's just a beautiful
Mhm.
ending. Yeah, I love that.
I would imagine too, like with the way that there's been many books made with all the Macquarie art from the original movies, that something like that will come down the line once there's multiple seasons of The
Right.
Mandalorian. I appreciated though. I appreciate seeing the concept and how similar it is to the actual shots from the
Yeah.
filming. Um, and I thought it was amusing, like with the Toro Calican episode, um, how the concept art had a totally different looking actor because they
Right.
probably hadn't cast him yet.
Yeah.
So it's easy with like Mando with his suit and his outfit, or the child, like you know what they're gonna look like. But as those secondary characters show up, it's always cool to see the creative process before maybe it's become fully realized and you've cast an actor in the role. So season 2, it's coming up October 30th. It's Friday. Only a couple weeks away. You excited?
Oh yes.
Yeah, a little bit. A little bit.
You know,
No, I think
there's
it's going to be
there's not
awesome to
much
see
to be
where
excited
this
for in
goes. Yeah.
2020, so it's kind of, we're taking what we can get. And if season 2 is what it is what it is.
Nate, what do you any specific parts coming out of the season 1 plot line that you are excited to see expanded upon in the storyline?
Yeah, like, are you talking about like things that were hinted at that might be coming about?
Yeah.
I mean, Yeah, I think I do think like Boba Fett's going to be involved at some point somehow. They're going to somehow bring him back from the dead or whatever
Yeah, I'm
happened.
curious about that.
And I've read stuff that hinted at that was going to happen, so that'll be cool to kind of bring him in. I'm interested in the Moff Gideon character, of course, like seeing where that goes. Yeah, I don't know. I guess those are kind of the two big things. I don't know. And we got to find out more about the child and what his powers are. If he's going to be taught more evil than good or good than evil, we don't know that. He's definitely seen a lot of violence. So I guess we don't really know where the child could go. We saw him choking. He did a choke move on Kara. So I guess he's kind of unpredictable at this point. Yeah, I don't know. I guess they said they were going to develop characters in sort of a more spread apart kind of Game of Thrones style, diverging paths. So I'm excited to kind of see what that could mean.
Yeah, especially after a season where it felt very contained. I'm ready for it to like let loose a little bit.
Yeah. I think that's a great idea. I loved that when they did that on Game of Thrones.
Yeah,
You kind of
same.
you saw like a huge map and like characters going this way and that. I mean, it's a little bit Lord of the Rings or, Tolkien style too, to have the characters kind of diverge and come back together. That could be really cool.
And similar to Game of Thrones, the character development in this series is so good that you feel for so many characters.
Right.
You would feel passionate about seeing anybody off on their own, going through trials and tribulations. And I wouldn't even be surprised if the child ends up with somebody else for a portion of time. Like Cara Dune ends up with the child, and that might be half of a season or more that he's not with Mando. You never know.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think Cara Dune's going to have a path that we follow her. I think we're going to have something more with I don't have the name right now, the Apollo Creed guy.
Grief Karga.
Grief. Yeah, we're going to definitely have more grief.
I'm excited for season 2 to find out why Moff Gideon wants the child so badly. Because I mean, you have the client, but then we find out, we don't learn a lot about Moff Gideon in the first place. Like, he doesn't come until the end of the season, and we find out that he's actually the one who wants the child. So what are his motives?
Yeah.
What does he see in the future for utilizing the child? And then also, like, that Darksaber thing, it's got to be a thing in season 2. There's no way it's not. So I'm really curious to see how that all comes into play and what the interactions are between Moff Gideon and the Mandalorian as far as that Darksaber is concerned, whose lap it ends up in.
Right. Yeah, we saw one of the episodes. We saw they were trying to extract something almost from the child.
Yeah, that doctor guy was like saying that he had to like extract something from the child, and that was all very strange. Like, what could he possibly be doing? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't like it. We got Zach America chiming in here. We are excited. I have spoken. Zach also says lots of buildup, lots of backstory. A 6-season arc to learn about the Yoda race and introducing new planetary destinations, and potentially, likely, a lot of things we can't predict yet. Zach, I could not agree more. I'm just like so excited to see more. I feel like we've just gotten a taste of what's to come. We've established our characters, and yeah, I just want more. I'm actually many people might not be big fans of the way that streaming services have been releasing episodes. The big thing at first was like Netflix is like, we're just going to dump an entire season on you. And when they dump the entire season on you, you binge it in one weekend. Everybody talks about it for 1 week, and then everybody stops talking about it.
Right. Yeah.
But releasing one episode at a time, you now have 8 weeks of people talking about your show, and that traditional water cooler talk of back when people couldn't even DVR TV shows. And I even like, I don't think that Disney Plus is going to do this, but HBO Max, when they dropped Raised by Wolves and they dropped the first 5 episodes, half the season at once, that was kind of cool because you could binge 5 and you didn't have any option to continue. And that way you didn't get burnt out on the series, but you were invested enough in the series to continue along with it.
Right.
Do you guys want more all at once, or are you cool with the one at a time? Or
I like one at a time. One per week is cool with me.
Yeah, I like one at a time, or even like a couple to come out like at a time. I feel like would be an appropriate amount. As much as I am totally on board with like binging stuff, I usually gravitate more towards I want to watch just an episode. I just want to like a little taste. Sometimes I do find myself getting burnt out if I watch too many episodes at once of something. And while I do believe that I would definitely binge The Mandalorian if it came out all at once, I also am like, you know what? Thanks for removing that challenge from me. Like, I don't have to to like weigh the option of like, am I just gonna, waste my day? Like, not to say waste my day, like, because I find value in television, but so to speak, I just wasted an entire day because I spent 8 hours straight watching a Baby Yoda.
Yeah. Well, you don't have time to like soak it in then, one episode a week, you watch it, you think about it a little bit during the week, you wonder what's going on. It gives you time to think about it,
To marinate a little bit.
It saves you on spoilers too, because like if your friends binge an entire season, now you have to binge it all or it's going to be ruined for you. One of my good friends, he binges everything, so he won't watch a show until every episode is aired. And I'm like, how do you avoid getting it ruined for you? But I guess it's like, where do you get your information coming in? How are you communicating with your friends? I know my friends, like not on purpose, but inadvertently, something would get spoiled for me by some website or some friend or what like that. So, bottom line, we're in it. We're ready for season 2. This is the way.
Sure.
It's time for our final segment of the podcast, Final Word. This is a game of rapid word association based on this week's topic, The Mandalorian. Our guests will be taking turns for a total of 10 topics each. The response to each topic should be a simple, short answer of the first thing that pops in their head.
The pressure's on.
The pressure is on.
Oh boy, I'm so nervous.
Nate, I'm gonna start with you, Nate.
All right. The
Are
password.
you ready? You ready?
Yeah.
All right. Number 1, Mando.
DeLorean.
Crystal. Queel.
I have spoken.
Number 2, Nate. Sandcrawler.
Sandy. I don't know. I had to be quick.
Number 2, Crystal. Cara Dune.
MMA fighter.
Oh.
No. Number 3, Nate. Child.
Fuzzy.
He's a little fuzzy.
Number 3, Crystal. Beskar.
Armor.
Number 4, Nate. ATST.
Monster.
Number 4, Crystal. IG-11.
Taika Waititi.
Okay.
Shout out to
I was
Taika.
trying to do one word per, but
That's okay. You can use 2 words.
all right.
Number 5. Gungan.
Silly.
Number 5, Crystal. Fennec Shand.
Assassin.
Number 6, Nate. Favreau.
Ooh.
Is he saying Favreau or Favre?
I say Favre.
Favreau.
I say Favre. Oh.
Number 6, Crystal. The Client.
You gotta see the baby.
What? What does that mean?
It's from Seinfeld.
Oh, I was gonna say that was Seinfeld. Yeah.
But that's all I think about when I think of that guy when he's like, I would like to see the baby. I'm
Number
sorry.
7.
One
All
word.
right, this is going so well.
Number 7, Nate. I think this segment's a keeper.
I wasn't given rules to abide by, so I've just
There are no rules. It's just
There's
a
only
quick
the
answer.
way.
You could have one word. You could have a few words.
All right.
Just a quick answer. The first thoughts that pop in your head.
Yeah.
Number 7, Nate. Grief Karga.
Ooh. Get to the chopper. I don't know where that came from.
That's a Dylan reference from Predator. I'll tell you where your answers are from, Nate.
Okay.
Number 7, Crystal. Dark Saber.
Dark helmet.
That's super goth.
Oh, it wasn't my turn.
Nate.
Whatever.
Anyway, my answer is goth.
Taking a while. I was filling space.
That's all right. Just take the rest of mine. Why don't you? That's fine.
All right, go ahead.
We got number 8 for Nate. Bantha.
Single file transport. I don't know. To hide their numbers.
Number 8, Crystal. Jawa.
Utini.
Wait, what was that one? I missed that whole.
Number 8, Crystal, was
Jawa.
Jawa.
Okay.
And I said, Utini. Utini. Don't make me do it again.
Misa.
That's what we should have done, is us doing impressions of characters.
Gungan.
Yeah, I'll give you a word and you have to do an impersonation. All right, number 9, Nate. Moff Gideon.
Ooh. Trying to think of a Breaking Bad reference. I'll just say blue ice.
Number 9, Crystal. Carbonite.
Well, I just want to do like a... Can I just...
Number 10, Nate. Stormtrooper.
Oh boy. Stormtrooper. Scout. The Scout Trooper is the best.
Number 10, Crystal. This
uniform.
is our final
That was a
one.
lame number 10.
Okay.
Mudhorn.
Disgusting.
All right. Before we wrap this up and get out of here, I want to remind our listeners that season 2 of Star Wars The Mandalorian starts streaming on Disney Plus on Friday, October 30th. Crystal, where can people check out the latest episodes of Wrestling Public Radio?
You can find me on Anchor Podcasts. You can find me on Apple Podcasts. You can find me on Pocket Casts. You can find me on Spotify. Wherever you want to listen to your podcast, you can listen to Wrestling Public Radio. If you want bonus content or any updates coming from me, I'm on Twitter at WPR Media. I like to do little tidbits on sharing of my favorite wrestler stuff that's going on. And I also am on Instagram and Facebook at Wrestling Public Radio.
Google her.
Google me.
All right.
Follow
Remember
me.
this episode.
Follow me on MySpace.
Nate's on Friendster. Remember this episode was streamed live on YouTube, where you can replay it now from now until forever. Starting next Monday, you'll be able to get the audio only version of it on all major podcasting sites, from Spotify to Apple Podcast app, Google, Anchor, whatever floats your boat. Nate, Crystal, thank you so much for being a part of today's episode.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. It was very enjoyable. Awesome as always. See you later.
Everyone stay safe out there, and we'll catch you for our next episode when I sit down with Ken Hoffman to talk all things A Nightmare on Elm Street. We'll be taking an in-depth look at the entire franchise, 9 films, TV series, collectibles, and more.